The incessant ticking of the clock echoed through the crowded hallways of Willow Creek High School, a stark reminder to Lily Martinez that another day of torment was about to begin. Her trembling fingers clutched the worn straps of her second-hand backpack as she navigated the sea of designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair. At 17, Lily was a vision of humble beauty, her long, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes, while clean and neat, were clearly from the local thrift store. As she approached her locker, the whispers began, like a sinister breeze carrying malice on its wings. "Look, it's Goodwill Lily," sneered Brittany Thompson, the queen bee of Willow Creek High. Her posse of sycophants erupted in cruel laughter, their perfectly manicured nails pointing at Lily's faded jeans and scuffed shoes. Lily's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she kept her head high, remembering her grandmother's words, "Your worth isn't in your wallet, Mija, but in your heart." Those words had become her mantra, a shield against the daily barrage of insults and exclusion. Just as Lily was about to reach her locker, a foot suddenly appeared in her path. Time seemed to slow as she tumbled forward, her books and papers scattering across the polished floor. The hallway erupted in laughter, the sound piercing Lily's ears like shards of glass. "Oops, my bad," Brittany's boyfriend, Chad Anderson, captain of the football team, smirked as he high-fived his teammates. "Maybe if you could afford better shoes, you wouldn't be so clumsy, Goodwill." Tears threatened to spill from Lily's eyes as she scrambled to gather her belongings. Suddenly, a pair of hands appeared, helping her collect the strewn papers. Lily looked up to see the kind eyes of Ethan Parker, the new transfer student who had arrived last week. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with genuine concern. Before Lily could respond, Brittany's shrill voice cut through the air. "Ethan, honey, you don't want to associate with her," Brittany cooed, linking her arm through his. "Come on, let me show you where the real people hang out." Ethan hesitated, his eyes darting between Brittany and Lily. For a moment, Lily dared to hope that someone might finally stand up for her. But as quickly as the hope had blossomed, it withered. Ethan allowed himself to be led away, casting an apologetic glance over his shoulder. Alone once more, Lily gathered the last of her papers and hurried to class, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind like a lifeline. The day dragged on, each class a battlefield where Lily fought to stay focused amidst the whispered insults and barely concealed snickers. In English class, Mrs. Anderson, a stern woman with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to pierce right through you, announced a group project. "You'll be working in pairs," Mrs. Anderson declared, her gaze sweeping across the room. "And before you all start choosing your best friends, I've already assigned the pairs." A collective groan rippled through the classroom. Lily's heart raced as she silently prayed not to be paired with one of her tormentors. "Lily Martinez," Mrs. Anderson called out, causing Lily to snap to attention. "You'll be working with Brittany Thompson." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Lily's stomach churned as she turned to see Brittany's look of utter disgust. This couldn't be happening. Working with Brittany would be a nightmare come to life. "Mrs. Anderson," Brittany's sickly sweet voice rang out, dripping with false politeness. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. You see, Lily and we have very different backgrounds. I'm not sure we'd work well together." The teacher's eyes narrowed. "That's precisely why I paired you two, Miss Thompson. Learning to work with people from all walks of life is an essential skill." The partnerships stand as announced. As the bell rang signaling the end of class, Lily felt a sense of dread settle over her like a heavy cloak. She gathered her things slowly, hoping to avoid a confrontation with Brittany. But luck was not on her side. "Listen here, Goodwill," Brittany hissed, cornering Lily by the classroom door. "Just because we're paired up doesn't mean we're friends. You stay out of my way, do all the work, and maybe, just maybe, I won't make your life even more miserable than it already is. Got it?" Lily nodded mutely, her throat too tight to form words. As Brittany sauntered away, Lily leaned against the wall, closing her eyes and taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. "Don't let them get to you," a soft voice said. Lily's eyes flew open to see Ethan standing nearby, a look of concern etched on his face. "I'm sorry about earlier. I should have said something." "It's okay," Lily murmured, though the words tasted bitter on her tongue. "You're new. You don't want to make enemies on your first week." Ethan opened his mouth as if to say more, but the warning bell rang, sending students scurrying to their next classes. With a final apologetic look, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Lily alone once more. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of whispers, snide comments, and lonely lunch periods spent hiding in the library. As the final bell rang, Lily breathed a sigh of relief. She hurried to her locker, eager to escape the confines of Willow Creek High and return to the safety of her small apartment. But as she turned the corner, her heart sank. Brittany and her crew were gathered around Lily's locker, malicious grins plastered on their faces. Brittany held a can of spray paint, the noxious fumes filling the air. Well, look who it is," Brittany drawled as Lily approached. "We thought your locker could use a little makeover. You know, to match your discount store wardrobe." Lily's eyes widened in horror as she saw the cruel words scrawled across her locker in bright red paint, "Goodwill girl, keep out." Laughter erupted around her as tears welled up in Lily's eyes. She turned to flee, only to collide with a solid chest. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Principal Harrison, his expression a mix of concern and anger. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the laughter like a knife. Brittany's smile never faltered as she batted her eyelashes innocently. "Oh, Principal Harrison. We were just trying to help Lily decorate her locker. You know how plain it's always been." Lily opened her mouth to protest, but years of torment had taught her that her word meant nothing against that of Willow Creek's elite. She braced herself for more humiliation, certain that Brittany would once again escape consequences. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. "Is that so, Miss Thompson?" Principal Harrison's voice was dangerously low. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain why the security cameras I had installed last week show a very different story?" The color drained from Brittany's face, her perfectly crafted mask of innocence crumbling. I don't know what you mean," she stammered, her eyes darting frantically to her friends for support. "My office. Now. All of you," Principal Harrison ordered, his tone brooking no argument. As Brittany and her crew were led away, the principal turned to Lily, his expression softening. "Miss Martinez, I'd like you to come as well. It's time we addressed this ongoing situation." As Lily followed Principal Harrison to his office, a mix of emotions swirled within her. Relief that finally, someone had seen the truth. Fear of what retribution might come from Brittany and her followers. And buried beneath it all, a tiny spark of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, things might finally change. Little did Lily know that this incident was just the beginning. The winds of change were blowing through Willow Creek High, carrying with them secrets, revelations, and a twist of fate that would turn her world, and the worlds of those around her, upside down. For Lily Martinez, the humble girl from the wrong side of the tracks, life was about to take an extraordinary turn, one that would leave her classmates in utter disbelief. The ticking of the antique clock in Principal Harrison's office seemed to grow louder with each passing second. Lily Martinez sat rigidly in her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as she watched Brittany Thompson and her posse squirm under the principal's stern gaze. "Ladies," Principal Harrison began, his voice low and controlled, "what I witnessed today goes beyond simple bullying. It's vandalism, harassment, and a complete disregard for the values we strive to uphold at Willow Creek High." Brittany, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the armrests of her chair, attempted to regain her composure. Principal Harrison, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were just dash. Save it, Miss Thompson, the principal cut her off sharply. The security footage leaves no room for misinterpretation. Now, I want each of you to understand the gravity of your actions. As Principal Harrison detailed the consequences, suspension, mandatory community service, and a black mark on their permanent records, Lily felt a mix of vindication and fear. For the first time, Brittany and her crew were facing real consequences for their actions. But Lily knew all too well that their punishment would only fuel their hatred towards her. As for you, Miss Martinez, Principal Harrison turned to Lily, his expression softening slightly. I owe you an apology. It's clear that this behavior has been ongoing, and we've failed to address it adequately. That ends today. Lily nodded numbly, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. As they were dismissed from the office, Brittany shot Lily a look of pure venom. This isn't over, Goodwill, she hissed under her breath. You'll regret this. The following days at Willow Creek High were a strange mix of relief and tension for Lily. With Brittany and her main followers suspended, the hallways seemed quieter, the air less charged with malice. Yet Lily could feel the resentment simmering beneath the surface, manifesting in cold glares and whispered threats from Brittany's remaining supporters. It was during this time that Lily found an unexpected ally in Ethan Parker. Free from Brittany's influence, he began to seek Lily out, first with tentative smiles in the hallway, then sitting with her at lunch. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you before, Ethan said one day as they sat together in the library. I was afraid of becoming a target myself. Lily looked at him, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. I understand, she said softly. It's not easy to go against the crowd. As they talked, Lily found herself opening up to Ethan in a way she hadn't with anyone at school before. She told him about her family's struggles, how her father had abandoned them when she was young, leaving her mother to work multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. That's why I work at the diner after school, Lily explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Every little bit helps, you know? Ethan listened intently, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and something else Lily couldn't quite identify. Lily, you're incredible, he said finally. The way you handle everything with such grace. I wish I had half your strength. For the first time in years, Lily felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a feeling of being truly seen and appreciated. But even as she basked in this newfound friendship, a part of her remained guarded, waiting for the other shoe to drop. That shoe came in the form of Brittany's return to school. The queen bee of Willow Creek High strode through the halls with an air of wounded dignity, her followers flocking around her like moths to a flame. But beneath her carefully crafted mask of indifference, Lily could see a storm brewing. It was in English class that the storm finally broke. Mrs. Anderson, true to her word, insisted that Lily and Brittany continue their partnership for the group project. But Mrs. Anderson, Brittany protested, her voice dripping with false sweetness, given recent events, I'm not sure Lily would be comfortable working with me. Perhaps it would be better if we changed partners. Mrs. Anderson's steely gaze bore into Brittany. Miss Thompson, part of your punishment includes learning to work with others, regardless of personal feelings. The partnership stand. As they reluctantly began to discuss their project, Lily could feel the tension radiating from Brittany. It was like sitting next to a coiled snake, waiting for it to strike. Listen, Goodwill, Brittany hissed when Mrs. Anderson's back was turned, you might think you've won, but trust me, this is far from over. I know things about you, things that would make your precious new friend Ethan run for the hills. Lily's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Brittany's lips curled into a cruel smile. Let's just say I did some digging. That diner you work at? I wonder what people would say if they knew the truth about what goes on there after hours. Before Lily could respond, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. Brittany sauntered away, leaving Lily frozen in her seat, her mind racing. How could Brittany know? She had been so careful. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and dread. By the time Lily arrived at Sally's diner for her afternoon shift, her nerves were frayed to the breaking point. "You okay, sugar?" Sally, the owner, asked as Lily fumbled with her apron. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Lily forced a smile. "I'm fine, Sally. Just a long day at school." As she moved through the diner, taking orders and refilling coffee cups, Lily's mind whirled with possibilities. What exactly did Brittany know? And more importantly, what was she planning to do with that information? It was nearing closing time when Lily saw a familiar face enter the diner. Her heart sank as Ethan slid into a booth, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. "Lily," he called out, waving her over. "I didn't know you worked here." With leaden feet, Lily approached his table. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" He smiled sheepishly. I wanted to surprise you. Maybe walk you home after your shift?" Under normal circumstances, Lily's heart would have soared at the gesture. But now, with Brittany's threat looming over her, all she felt was panic. "That's really sweet, Ethan, but I dash." Her words were cut off by a commotion from the kitchen. The swinging door burst open, and a middle-aged man stumbled out, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. "Where's my little girl?" he slurred, his gaze sweeping the diner until it landed on Lily. "There you are, sweetheart." Lily's world seemed to tilt on its axis. No, this couldn't be happening. Not now, not here. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's eyes widened in confusion as he looked between Lily and the disheveled man now making his way towards them. "Lily, what's going on?" Ethan asked, concern etched across his features. But Lily couldn't answer. She was frozen in place as her father, the man who had abandoned her family years ago, the man she had told everyone was dead, stumbled towards her with open arms. "Come here, give your old man a hug," he exclaimed, his words slurring together. Sally emerged from the kitchen, her face a mask of concern and anger. "Frank! I told you to stay in the back until you sobered up." The pieces started to fall into place in Lily's mind. This was what Brittany had discovered. The shameful secret Lily had been hiding for months, that her father, a hopeless alcoholic, had returned, not to make amends, but to leech off what little her family had managed to scrape together in his absence. Tears stung Lily's eyes as she looked at Ethan, seeing the confusion and shock on his face. This was it. The moment her carefully constructed world would come crashing down around her. I can explain," she began, but the words caught in her throat. Her father, oblivious to the tension in the room, threw an arm around Lily's shoulders. "Isn't she a good girl?" he slurred to no one in particular. "Working to support her old man. Not like her mother, always nagging, always complaining." Lily shrugged off his arm, her cheeks burning with shame and anger. "Dad, please, just go back to the kitchen. We'll talk later." But Frank was beyond reason, his alcohol-addled mind fixated on airing the family's dirty laundry. "You know, she tells everyone I'm dead," he said to Ethan, who sat frozen in his seat. Ashamed of her own father, can you believe it? The diner had fallen silent, all eyes on the unfolding drama. Lily felt as if she were standing on a stage, her deepest secrets laid bare for all to see. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to Ethan, unable to meet his eyes. Then, unable to bear the weight of the stares and the crushing shame any longer, Lily did the only thing she could think of, she ran. Out of the diner she fled, into the cool night air, her tears blurring her vision as she raced down the empty streets of Willow Creek. Behind her, she could hear Ethan calling her name, but she didn't stop. She couldn't face him, couldn't bear to see the pity or disgust that would surely be in his eyes. As she ran, Lily's mind whirled with the implications of what had just happened. How long before the whole school knew? How could she face everyone, knowing that her deepest shame was now public knowledge? She found herself in the small park near her apartment complex, collapsing onto a bench as sobs racked her body. This was it, she thought. The end of any hope she had of rising above her circumstances, of being seen as more than just Goodwill Lily. Lily, a soft voice called out, causing her to lift her tear-stained face. There, silhouetted in the dim light of a street lamp, stood Ethan. How did you find me?" Lily asked, her voice hoarse from crying. Ethan approached slowly, as if afraid she might bolt again. "I followed you." "Lily, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." She laughed bitterly. "Of course you didn't. Nobody did. That was the point." Ethan sat down beside her, close enough to offer comfort but not so close as to make her uncomfortable. "Do you want to talk about it?" For a moment, Lily was tempted to lie, to create some story that would salvage what was left of her dignity. But looking into Ethan's kind eyes, she found herself telling him everything, how her father had abandoned them years ago, how he had recently returned not to make amends but to leech off their meager resources, how she had been working extra shifts at the diner to help support him in secret, afraid of what would happen if he was left to his own devices. "I was so ashamed," Lily finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if people knew the truth, they'd see me as trash. Just like Brittany always said." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. Then, to Lily's surprise, he took her hand in his. "Lily," he said, his voice filled with a conviction that made her look up at him, "you are the strongest, most incredible person I have ever met. What you've been dealing with, it's more than anyone should have to bear. And you've done it with such grace, such dignity." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes again, but this time, they weren't tears of shame or anger. They were tears of relief, of the profound weight of her secret finally being lifted. You don't think less of me?" she asked hesitantly. Ethan shook his head emphatically. "God, no. Lily, I admire you more than ever. And I promise you, we'll face whatever comes next together. You're not alone anymore." As they sat there in the quiet park, Lily felt something shift inside her. The fear and shame that had been her constant companions for so long began to recede, replaced by a tentative hope. She didn't know what the coming days would bring, how her classmates would react, what Brittany would do with the information she had, but for the first time in years, Lily didn't feel alone. Little did she know that this moment of vulnerability, this revelation of her deepest secret, was just the beginning. The winds of change were blowing stronger than ever through Willow Creek, carrying with them more secrets, more revelations, and twists of fate that would shake the very foundations of the life she thought she knew. The morning sun peeked through the threadbare curtains of Lily Martinez's small bedroom, its warm rays a stark contrast to the cold dread settling in her stomach. Today was the day she would have to face her classmates after the disastrous scene at Sally's diner. As she dressed in her usual thrift store attire, Lily's mind raced with possibilities of what awaited her at Willow Creek High. Her mother, Maria, noticed Lily's distress as she entered the tiny kitchen of their apartment. "Mija, what's wrong? You look like you're going to be sick." Lily forced a smile, not wanting to burden her mother with more worries. "It's nothing, Mama. Just nervous about a test." Maria's tired eyes, lined with years of hard work and worry, softened with concern. "Lily, you know you can tell me anything, right? We're in this together." For a moment, Lily was tempted to confess everything: the bullying, her father's return, the shame she'd been carrying. But looking at her mother's weary face, she couldn't bring herself to add to her burdens. "I know, Mama. Everything's fine, I promise." As Lily made her way to school, her steps growing heavier with each block, she replayed her conversation with Ethan from the night before. His words of support had been a balm to her soul, but in the harsh light of day, doubt began to creep in. Would he still stand by her when faced with the inevitable gossip and judgment of their peers? The whispers started the moment Lily stepped onto the school grounds. Clusters of students huddled together, their eyes darting to her and then quickly away. She could feel the weight of their stares, hear the hushed conversations that fell silent as she passed. "Did you hear about Goodwill Lily's dad? I can't believe she lied about him being dead. No wonder she shops at thrift stores. Her dad probably drank away all their money." Each whispered comment was like a knife to Lily's heart, but she held her head high, channeling every ounce of strength she possessed to keep moving forward. As she approached her locker, a familiar voice called out, "Lily, wait up!" Turning, she saw Ethan jogging towards her, a concerned smile on his face. For a brief moment, relief washed over her. He hadn't abandoned her after all. "Hey," Ethan said softly as he reached her. "How are you holding up?" Before Lily could respond, a shrill voice cut through the hallway. Well, if it isn't Willow Creek's very own Charity Case and her knight in shining armor." Brittany Thompson sauntered towards them, her perfectly glossed lips curled in a cruel smile. A crowd began to gather, sensing the impending drama. "What do you want, Brittany?" Ethan asked, stepping slightly in front of Lily. Brittany's eyes gleamed with malice. "Oh, I just wanted to congratulate Lily on her Oscar-worthy performance. I mean, convincing everyone that her deadbeat dad was actually dead? That takes some serious acting chops." Lily felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. "You don't know anything about my family, Brittany." "Oh, but I do," Brittany countered, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "In fact, I think it's time everyone knew the truth about St. Lily." With a dramatic flourish, Brittany pulled out her phone and held it up for all to see. On the screen was a video, shaky footage of Lily's father stumbling out of the diner kitchen, slurring his words as he exposed their family's secrets. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. Lily felt as if the floor was tilting beneath her feet, the walls of the hallway closing in. You filmed that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Brittany smirked. "Of course I did. I knew you were hiding something, Goodwill. I just needed to find out what it was." Ethan stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough, Brittany. You've made your point." But Brittany wasn't finished. She turned to address the gathered students, her voice ringing out clear and cruel. "You see, everyone? Little Miss Perfect isn't so perfect after all. Her dad's a drunk, her family's broke, and she's been lying to all of us. Is this really someone you want to feel sorry for?" The silence that followed was deafening. Lily could feel the judgment, the pity, and the morbid curiosity radiating from her classmates. It was too much. Without a word, she turned and fled, pushing past the crowd and running blindly down the hallway. She found herself in the empty auditorium, collapsing into a seat in the back row as sobs racked her body. This was it. Her worst nightmare come to life. Everyone knew. Everyone had seen. There was no coming back from this. "Lily?" A soft voice echoed through the empty space. Lifting her tear-stained face, Lily saw Mrs. Anderson, her English teacher, standing in the aisle. "I'm sorry," Lily choked out, hastily wiping at her eyes. "I know I should be in class. I couldn't. Mrs. Anderson's eyes were filled with a mix of concern and understanding as she sat down next to Lily. It's all right. I saw what happened in the hallway. Brittany's actions were completely unacceptable. Lily laughed bitterly. It doesn't matter. Everyone knows now. They'll all look at me differently. Perhaps, Mrs. Anderson said gently. But not necessarily in the way you think. Confused, Lily looked at her teacher. Mrs. Anderson's eyes held a faraway look, as if she were seeing something beyond the dimly lit auditorium. Lily, there's something I think you should know, she began, her voice low and measured. Something that might help you understand that you're not alone in facing adversity. And then, to Lily's utter astonishment, Mrs. Anderson began to share her own story. A tale of growing up in poverty, of a father lost to addiction, of the shame and fear that had dominated her youth. I was you, Lily, Mrs. Anderson said, her usually stern demeanor softening with each word. Scared, ashamed, trying so hard to hide the truth of my life from everyone around me. But do you know what I learned? Lily shook her head, too stunned to speak. I learned that our struggles don't define us. They refine us. Every hardship you've faced, every obstacle you've overcome, they've made you stronger, more compassionate, more resilient than you know. As Mrs. Anderson's words washed over her, Lily felt something shift inside her. The shame and fear that had been her constant companions for so long began to give way to something else, a glimmer of pride, of determination. But what do I do now? Lily asked, her voice small but steadier. How do I face everyone after this? Mrs. Anderson smiled, a fierce light in her eyes. You hold your head high, Lily Martinez. You show them that you are more than your circumstances, more than the gossip and judgment. And you remember that you are not alone. With that, Mrs. Anderson stood, extending a hand to Lily. Now, what do you say we head back to class? I believe you and Miss Thompson have a project to work on. Taking a deep breath, Lily nodded and took her teacher's hand. As they walked back towards the classroom, Lily felt a newfound strength coursing through her veins. She didn't know what awaited her, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to face it head-on. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. But with each step, each raised chin in the face of gossip, Lily felt herself growing stronger. Ethan remained steadfastly by her side, his quiet support a balm to her battered spirit. It was during their English class, as Lily reluctantly took her seat next to Brittany to work on their project, that the next twist in her story began to unfold. Listen, Goodwill, Brittany hissed, her voice low enough that only Lily could hear. Don't think this changes anything. You're still nothing, and I'm still Dash. Miss Thompson, Mrs. Anderson's sharp voice cut through Brittany's tirade. A word, please. In the hallway. As Brittany followed Mrs. Anderson out of the classroom, Lily couldn't help but notice the flash of fear that crossed the queen bee's face. What could Mrs. Anderson possibly have to say that would rile Brittany Thompson? The minutes ticked by, the class buzzing with speculation. When Brittany finally returned, her face was pale, her usual confident swagger replaced by a subdued, almost nervous demeanor. Lily, she said stiffly, not meeting Lily's eyes. I'm sorry for what I did. It was wrong of me to expose your personal life like that. Lily blinked in surprise. An apology was the last thing she had expected from Brittany Thompson. Before she could respond, the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. As students began to file out, Lily noticed Brittany lingering, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Curiosity got the better of her. Brittany, Lily called out softly. Are you okay? Brittany's head snapped up, her eyes wide with an emotion Lily couldn't quite place. For a moment, it seemed as if Brittany might actually confide in her. But then the mask slipped back into place, and with a toss of her perfectly styled hair, Brittany stormed out of the classroom. As Lily gathered her things, her mind whirled with questions. What had Mrs. Anderson said to Brittany? And why did the usually unflappable queen bee of Willow Creek High suddenly seem so vulnerable? Lost in thought, Lily didn't notice Ethan waiting for her outside the classroom until she nearly walked into him. "Oh, Ethan, I'm sorry. I was just million miles away," he finished with a gentle smile. "Can't blame you after the day you've had. Listen, I was thinking, maybe we could go for a walk? There's a place I'd like to show you." Despite her exhaustion, Lily found herself nodding. There was something in Ethan's eyes, a mix of determination and nervousness, that piqued her curiosity. As they walked through the streets of Willow Creek, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows, Ethan began to speak. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Something about why I transferred to Willow Creek High." Lily's heart quickened. She had always sensed there was more to Ethan's story than he let on, but she had never pushed, understanding all too well the need for privacy. They found themselves in a small, secluded park on the outskirts of town. Ethan led Lily to a bench overlooking a serene pond, the surface glimmering in the fading sunlight. "My family," Ethan began, his eyes fixed on the water. "We're not who everyone thinks we are." And then, in a rush of words, Ethan's story came pouring out. A tale of a family fortune lost, of a father's desperate attempts to maintain appearances, of a life of privilege suddenly stripped away. "We moved here to start over," Ethan finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "No one knows. I've been pretending to be something I'm not, afraid of what would happen if people found out the truth." Lily sat in stunned silence, processing Ethan's revelation. Suddenly, so many things made sense: his initial hesitation to stand up to Brittany, his understanding of Lily's situation, the depth of compassion in his eyes when he looked at her. "Ethan," she said softly, reaching out to take his hand. "Thank you for trusting me with this." He looked at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "After everything you've been through, everything you've faced with such courage, I couldn't keep hiding. You inspired me, Lily. To be honest, to be brave." As they sat there, hand in hand, the setting sun painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, Lily felt a profound sense of connection. For the first time in her life, she truly understood that she wasn't alone in her struggles. But even as this newfound bond with Ethan filled her with warmth, a nagging thought tugged at the back of Lily's mind. Brittany's strange behavior, Mrs. Anderson's intervention, Ethan's revelation. It felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her feet, the carefully constructed social order of Willow Creek High crumbling away to reveal what? Little did Lily know that the revelations of this day were just the beginning. As she and Ethan made their way back through the darkening streets of Willow Creek, the winds of change were blowing stronger than ever. Secrets long buried were clawing their way to the surface, alliances were shifting, and the true nature of those around her was about to be exposed in ways that would leave Lily, and everyone else, in utter disbelief. The crisp morning air nipped at Lily Martinez's cheeks as she made her way to Willow Creek High, her mind still reeling from the events of the past few days. The revelation of her family's struggles, Brittany's unexpected apology, and Ethan's confession had left her feeling as if she were walking on shifting sands. Yet, beneath the uncertainty, a newfound strength pulsed through her veins. As Lily approached the school gates, a commotion near the parking lot caught her attention. A crowd had gathered, their excited whispers carrying on the wind. Curiosity piqued, Lily made her way over, only to freeze in her tracks at the sight before her. There, in the center of the crowd, stood Brittany Thompson, but not the Brittany that Willow Creek High had come to know. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. Instead, Brittany wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, her face bare of makeup, and her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. But it wasn't just Brittany's appearance that had everyone buzzing. It was the beat-up old car she had emerged from, a far cry from the luxury vehicle she usually drove. As their eyes met across the crowd, Lily saw something in Brittany's gaze she had never seen before: vulnerability and a silent plea for understanding. Before Lily could process what she was seeing, Principal Harrison's voice boomed across the parking lot. "All right, everyone. The bell's about to ring. Get to class." As the crowd dispersed, Lily found herself falling into step beside Brittany. For a moment, they walked in awkward silence, the weight of their shared secrets and past animosity hanging heavy between them. "Brittany," Lily began hesitantly, "are you dash?" "Don't," Brittany cut her off, her voice lacking its usual bite. "Just don't, okay? I can't deal with your pity right now." With that, Brittany quickened her pace, leaving Lily standing alone in the hallway, more confused than ever. The morning passed in a blur of whispered conversations and speculative glances. It seemed Lily wasn't the only one who had noticed the dramatic change in Brittany Thompson. By lunchtime, the rumor mill was in full swing. "I heard her dad's company went bankrupt." "No way. I bet she's just trying to get attention after what she did to Lily." "But did you see her car? Something's definitely up." As Lily made her way to her usual table, tray in hand, she couldn't help but notice Brittany sitting alone in a corner of the cafeteria, picking listlessly at her food. The sight stirred something unexpected in Lily's chest, a mix of empathy and curiosity that she couldn't quite shake. "Earth to Lily," Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. "You okay? You seem a million miles away." Lily turned to her friend, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Sorry, have you seen Brittany today?" Ethan's brow furrowed. "Yeah, it's weird, right? I mean, after everything she did to you, I'm not exactly feeling sympathetic, but something's clearly wrong," Lily finished, her eyes drifting back to Brittany's solitary figure. Before Ethan could respond, a hush fell over the cafeteria. Lily looked up to see Mrs. Anderson striding purposefully towards Brittany's table. The two exchanged a few quiet words before Brittany stood, gathering her things and following the teacher out of the room. As the cafeteria erupted into fresh speculation, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she was witnessing the unraveling of something much bigger than she had initially thought. The rest of the school day passed in a haze of distraction. Lily found herself unable to focus on her classes, her mind constantly drifting to Brittany's transformation and Mrs. Anderson's mysterious involvement. As the final bell rang, Lily made a split-second decision. Instead of heading straight home, she made her way to Mrs. Anderson's classroom, determined to get some answers. She found her English teacher sitting at her desk, a pensive look on her face as she stared out the window. "Mrs. Anderson?" Lily called softly, not wanting to startle her. The teacher turned, a small smile gracing her features as she saw Lily. "Ah, Miss Martinez. I had a feeling you might stop by." Lily hesitated for a moment before plunging ahead. I was wondering if you could tell me what's going on with Brittany. I know it's none of my business, but after everything that's happened." Mrs. Anderson sighed, gesturing for Lily to take a seat. "You're right, it's not your business. But given the circumstances, I think you deserve to know at least part of the story." And so, in the quiet of the empty classroom, Mrs. Anderson began to weave a tale that left Lily reeling. The Thompson family, Mrs. Anderson explained, has been living a lie for years. Robert Thompson, Brittany's father, built his wealth on a house of cards, fraudulent investments, embezzlement, the works. It all came crashing down last week. Lily's eyes widened in disbelief. "But how?" Why? Mrs. Anderson's eyes took on a faraway look. Greed, desperation, the pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle. It's a tale as old as time, Lily. And now, Brittany and her family are facing the consequences. As the full weight of this revelation settled over her, Lily felt a complex mix of emotions swirling in her chest. Shock, certainly. A twinge of satisfaction at seeing her tormentor brought low. But also, unexpectedly, a deep well of empathy. What's going to happen to them? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Anderson shook her head. That remains to be seen. But Brittany, she's going to need support. Understanding. Perhaps even friendship from someone who knows what it's like to face adversity. The implication in Mrs. Anderson's words was clear. Lily sat back, her mind whirling with the magnitude of what she was being asked to consider. I know it's a lot to ask, Mrs. Anderson continued gently. After everything Brittany's put you through, no one would blame you for walking away. But sometimes, Lily, the most powerful act of strength is extending a hand to those who've wronged us. As Lily left the classroom, her head spinning with everything she'd learned, she found herself face to face with the last person she expected, Brittany Thompson. For a moment, the two girls stood frozen, the weight of their shared history and newfound understanding hanging heavy between them. Lily, Brittany began, her voice cracking with emotion. But before she could continue, a commotion from down the hallway caught their attention. A man's angry voice echoed off the lockers, growing louder as he approached. Where is she? Where's my daughter? Lily's blood ran cold as she recognized the slurred speech and unsteady gait. Her father had come to the school, and from the sound of it, he was far from sober. Panic rising in her chest, Lily turned to flee, only to find Brittany's hand on her arm. Come on, Brittany said urgently, tugging Lily towards a nearby classroom. We can hide in here. As they huddled together in the darkened room, listening to the muffled sounds of Lily's father arguing with school security, Lily felt a surreal sense of déjà vu. How many times had she hidden from her father's drunken rages? But never had she imagined she'd be doing so with Brittany Thompson by her side. I'm sorry, Brittany whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. I had no idea what you were going through. I was so caught up in my own world, in maintaining this perfect image, that I became a monster. Lily turned to look at her former tormentor, seeing for the first time the scared, vulnerable girl beneath the carefully crafted facade. I'm sorry too, Lily found herself saying. Not for anything I did, but for what you're going through now. No one deserves to have their world turned upside down like that. A ghost of a smile flickered across Brittany's face. Look at us. Who would have thought we'd end up here? Before Lily could respond, the door to the classroom burst open. Both girls jumped, fear coursing through them, only to see Ethan standing there, concern etched across his features. Lily! Are you okay? I heard your dad was here and she broke off, noticing Brittany for the first time. What's going on? As Lily opened her mouth to explain, a new voice joined the fray, one that sent chills down her spine. Well, what do we have here? Standing in the doorway, swaying slightly but with a dangerous glint in his eye, was Frank Martinez, Lily's father. Dad, Lily breathed, instinctively stepping in front of Brittany and Ethan. What are you doing here? Frank's bloodshot eyes narrowed as he took in the scene before him. Came to see my little girl. Is that a crime? But look at you, hiding away with your fancy friends. Too good for your old man now, huh? Lily felt Ethan tense beside her, ready to intervene. But it was Brittany who spoke up, her voice surprisingly steady. Mr. Martinez, you need to leave. The school's called security. If you go now, you can avoid any trouble. Frank's attention snapped to Brittany, a cruel smile twisting his features. And who might you be, princess? Another one looking down on us common folk? Dad, please, Lily pleaded, her heart racing. Just go home. We can talk later, I promise. For a moment, it seemed as if Frank might listen. But then his face contorted with rage. Don't you tell me what to do, girl. I'm your father, and you'll show me some respect. He lunged forward, his hand raised as if to strike. Lily flinched, bracing for the impact, but it never came. Instead, she heard a solid thud and opened her eyes to see her father sprawled on the floor, Ethan standing over him with a look of fierce determination. Don't you dare touch her, Ethan growled, his usual gentle demeanor replaced by a protective fury Lily had never seen before. The commotion had drawn attention. Within moments, Principal Harrison and 2 security guards burst into the room, quickly assessing the situation and moving to restrain Frank. As her father was led away, his angry shouts echoing down the hallway, Lily felt her knees give way. She would have collapsed if not for Brittany and Ethan's steady hands supporting her. It's okay, Ethan murmured, pulling her into a gentle embrace. You're safe now. We've got you. To Lily's surprise, she felt another pair of arms encircle her. Looking up, she saw Brittany had joined the hug, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Brittany whispered again. For everything. I want to make it right, Lily. I want to be better. As the 3 of them stood there, wrapped in an unlikely embrace, Lily felt something shift within her. The walls she had built around her heart, the defenses she had maintained for so long, began to crumble. In that moment, surrounded by the support of a former enemy and a steadfast friend, Lily realized that perhaps the greatest strength lay not in facing adversity alone, but in allowing others to stand beside you. Little did they know, this moment of unity was just the beginning. As they left the school that evening, walking together under the warm glow of the setting sun, the winds of change continued to blow through Willow Creek. Secrets were surfacing, alliances were shifting, and the true nature of friendship and redemption was about to be tested in ways none of them could have imagined. For Lily Martinez, the girl who had once been laughed at and ostracized, a new chapter was beginning. One that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her peers, and the power of forgiveness. The stage was set for revelations that would leave not just her classmates, but the entire town of Willow Creek in utter disbelief. The following weeks at Willow Creek High were a whirlwind of change for Lily Martinez. The girl who had once walked the halls with her head down, desperate to avoid attention, now found herself at the center of a transforming social landscape. The unlikely alliance between Lily, Ethan, and Brittany had not gone unnoticed. Whispers followed them through the corridors, a mix of confusion, curiosity, and in some cases, resentment. The carefully constructed hierarchy of high school popularity was crumbling, and no one quite knew what to make of it. Brittany, stripped of her designer clothes and queen bee status, was a shadow of her former self. Yet, in her vulnerability, she was discovering a strength she never knew she possessed. Lily watched with a mixture of amazement and cautious hope as Brittany took her first tentative steps towards redemption. One crisp autumn morning, as Lily was organizing her locker, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she found herself face to face with Megan, one of Brittany's former followers. "Hey, Lily," Megan said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. The way we treated you, it wasn't right." Lily blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond. Before she could formulate a reply, Megan continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It's just, seeing you and Brittany now, how you've forgiven her after everything, it made me realize how petty and cruel we've all been. I don't expect us to be friends or anything, but I hoped maybe we could start over?" As Lily looked into Megan's earnest face, she felt a warmth spreading through her chest. This, she realized, was the power of forgiveness and compassion, not just to heal old wounds, but to inspire change in others. "I'd like that, Megan," Lily said softly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you." As Megan walked away, visibly relieved, Lily felt a presence at her side. Turning, she saw Ethan, a look of pride shining in his eyes. "You're changing things around here, Lily," he said, taking her hand in his. "People are starting to see what I've known all along, how amazing you are." Lily felt a blush creeping up her cheeks, still unused to such open admiration. But before she could respond, a commotion down the hall caught their attention. A crowd had gathered around the bulletin board, excited chatter filling the air. Curious, Lily and Ethan made their way over, squeezing through the throng to see what had caused such a stir. There, pinned to the center of the board, was a large, colorful poster. Willow Creek High Presents, a night of hope and healing. A charity gala to support families affected by addiction and financial hardship. Organized by Brittany Thompson. Lily's jaw dropped. She turned to Ethan, seeing her own shock mirrored in his expression. This was unexpected, to say the least. As if summoned by their thoughts, Brittany appeared beside them, nervousness radiating from her in waves. "So, what do you think?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily stared at her former tormentor, now tentative friend, seeing the hope and fear warring in Brittany's eyes. In that moment, she made a decision that would set in motion events beyond anything she could have imagined. "I think it's wonderful, Brittany," Lily said warmly. "And I want to help. Let's do this together." The smile that broke across Brittany's face was like the sun emerging from behind storm clouds, bright, warm, and full of promise. As the three of them began to discuss plans for the gala, none of them noticed the figure lurking at the edge of the crowd, watching with narrowed eyes and a calculating expression. Chad Anderson, Brittany's ex-boyfriend and former king of Willow Creek High, was not pleased with these new developments. Not pleased at all. The weeks leading up to the gala were a flurry of activity. Lily, Brittany, and Ethan threw themselves into the preparations, working tirelessly to secure donations, arrange entertainment, and transform the school gymnasium into a glittering ballroom. It was during one of their late-night planning sessions, huddled over a table in Sally's diner, that Lily began to see a side of Brittany she never knew existed. "I was thinking," Brittany said, chewing thoughtfully on the end of her pen, "maybe we could set up a booth at the gala for people to share their stories. You know, to show that addiction and financial struggles can affect anyone, regardless of their background." Lily and Ethan exchanged surprised glances. This level of empathy and insight was a far cry from the Brittany they had known just months ago. "That's actually a really great idea," Ethan said, genuine admiration in his voice. Brittany's cheeks flushed with pleasure at the praise. "Thanks. I just keep thinking about how alone I felt when everything with my family came crashing down. If I can help even one person feel less isolated, less ashamed, well, maybe that's a start towards making up for all the hurt I've caused." As Lily looked at Brittany in that moment, she felt the last vestiges of resentment melting away, replaced by a deep respect for the person Brittany was becoming. But even as their friendship deepened and the excitement for the gala grew, shadows were gathering on the horizon. One evening, as Lily was leaving the diner after her shift, she found Chad Anderson leaning against her beat-up car, a smirk playing on his lips. Well, he drawled, pushing off the car and sauntering towards her. "If it isn't Willow Creek's very own Cinderella. Enjoying your time in the spotlight, Goodwill?" Lily tensed, her hand tightening on her car keys. "What do you want, Chad?" He circled her slowly, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Oh, I'm just curious. How does it feel, having everyone fawning over you now? Must be quite the change from being the school charity case." I'm not interested in playing games, Chad, Lily said firmly, moving to open her car door. If you don't have anything important to say, I'm leaving. But Chad's next words stopped her cold. You know, it's funny. All this talk about honesty and second chances, and yet there are still so many secrets floating around. I wonder what would happen if some of those secrets came to light at the gala. Lily's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Chad's smile was all teeth, no warmth. Let's just say I've been doing some digging. About your dad, about Brittany's family, even about your precious Ethan. And trust me, what I've found would make for one hell of a show. Before Lily could respond, Chad was already walking away, calling over his shoulder, "See you at the gala, Goodwill. It's going to be a night to remember." As Lily drove home that night, her mind raced with possibilities. What did Chad know? And more importantly, what was he planning to do with that information? She debated whether to tell Brittany and Ethan about Chad's threats, but ultimately decided against it. They had all worked so hard for this gala, put so much of themselves into it. She couldn't bear to see it derailed by Chad's malice. No, she would handle this herself. Somehow. The night of the gala arrived, bringing with it a nervous energy that thrummed through the transformed gymnasium. Twinkling lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed attendees. At the center of it all stood Lily, Brittany, and Ethan, greeting guests and basking in the fruits of their labor. I can't believe we actually pulled this off, Brittany whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. Lily squeezed her hand reassuringly. We did it together. That's what matters. As the evening progressed, Lily found herself constantly scanning the crowd, her nerves on edge as she waited for Chad to make his move. But as the hours ticked by with no sign of trouble, she began to relax, allowing herself to enjoy the moment. It was during a lull in the festivities, as Lily was making her way to the refreshment table, that she overheard a heated conversation coming from behind a nearby curtain. You can't do this, Chad. It's not right. The voice was unmistakably Megan's, tinged with desperation. Oh, come on, Meg. Don't tell me you've gone soft too. This is our chance to put everyone back in their place. To remind them who really runs this school. Chad's voice was low, dangerous. Lily's heart raced. This was it. Whatever Chad was planning, it was about to happen. She had to do something, had to stop it before. But it was too late. Before Lily could move, Chad burst from behind the curtain, striding purposefully towards the stage where Principal Harrison was preparing to give a speech. Time seemed to slow as Lily watched Chad ascend the steps, a triumphant gleam in his eye. She saw Brittany and Ethan across the room, their faces mirroring her own confusion and growing dread. Ladies and gentlemen, Chad's voice boomed through the microphone, silencing the crowd. I hope you're all enjoying this lovely evening of, what was it called? Hope and healing? A ripple of unease passed through the gathered guests. Principal Harrison moved to intervene, but Chad smoothly sidestepped him. You see, I think it's time for some real honesty here. After all, isn't that what this whole event is about? So let me share some truths that our organizers have been keeping from you. Lily's feet finally unstuck from the floor, and she began pushing her way through the crowd, desperate to reach the stage. But she knew, with a sinking feeling in her gut, that she would be too late. Did you know, Chad continued, his voice dripping with false concern, that our dear Lily's father isn't just an alcoholic, but a petty criminal as well? Oh yes, multiple arrests for theft and fraud. Quite the family legacy, wouldn't you say? Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lily felt her cheeks burning with shame and anger, but Chad wasn't finished. And let's not forget about Brittany. Sure, Her family's fallen on hard times, but did she tell you that her father is currently under investigation for embezzlement? That the charity you've also generously donated to tonight might be nothing more than a way to funnel money back into the Thompson family coffers? Brittany's anguished cry cut through the air, but Chad pressed on, his eyes now locked on Ethan. But the real kicker, ladies and gentlemen, is our golden boy Ethan. Did you know that his family's financial troubles stem from his father's gambling addiction? That they're not just broke, but deeply in debt to some very dangerous people? The gymnasium erupted into chaos. Lily finally reached the stage, her eyes meeting Chad's with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Why?" she demanded, her voice cracking with emotion. "Why would you do this?" Chad's smirk was cold, devoid of any real satisfaction. "Because, Goodwill, people like you don't get happy endings. It's time everyone remembered that." But as Chad turned to bask in the discord he had sown, something unexpected happened. A voice rang out, clear and strong, cutting through the noise. "Enough!" All eyes turned to see Mrs. Anderson striding towards the stage, a fire in her eyes that Lily had never seen before. "Mr. Anderson," Mrs. Anderson's voice was steel wrapped in silk, "I believe you've said quite enough. Now it's my turn to share some truths." As Mrs. Anderson took the microphone, Lily felt a hand slip into hers. She turned to see Ethan beside her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. On her other side, Brittany appeared, tear-streaked but standing tall. Together, they faced the crowd, ready to weather whatever storm was coming. Because in that moment, Lily realized that the ties that bound them, forged through shared pain, mutual understanding, and the courage to change, were stronger than any secrets or lies. As Mrs. Anderson began to speak, her words weaving a tale of redemption, forgiveness, and the true meaning of strength, Lily felt a shift in the air. The winds of change that had been blowing through Willow Creek were about to become a tempest, one that would leave no one untouched. And as she stood there, hand in hand with the unlikeliest of allies, Lily Martinez, the girl who had once been laughed at and ostracized, knew that whatever came next, she would face it with her head held high. For she had discovered a truth more powerful than any secret, that real strength lies not in tearing others down, but in lifting them up. The revelations that would follow in the wake of Chad's cruel expose would indeed leave the residents of Willow Creek in utter disbelief. But not for the reasons Chad had intended. No, what would truly astound them was the resilience, compassion, and unwavering spirit of three teenagers who had found in each other the strength to rise above their circumstances and become the authors of their own stories. As Mrs. Anderson's voice rang out, weaving a narrative of hope and redemption, the true transformation of Willow Creek High, and perhaps the town itself, was only just beginning. The gymnasium of Willow Creek High, so recently a scene of glittering hope, now crackled with tension. All eyes were fixed on Mrs. Anderson as she stood on the stage, her normally composed demeanor replaced by a fierce determination that seemed to radiate from her very being. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Anderson began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, "what you've just witnessed is not the exposure of truth, but the last desperate act of someone clinging to a world that no longer exists." Chad, who had been basking in the chaos he'd created, suddenly looked uncertain. This wasn't how he had expected things to unfold. Mrs. Anderson continued, her gaze sweeping across the stunned crowd. "Yes, these young people have faced challenges. Yes, their families have struggled. But the true measure of a person is not in the hardships they face, but in how they choose to overcome them." She turned to Lily, Ethan, and Brittany, who still stood united at the edge of the stage. "These three have shown us what real strength looks like. They've faced their demons head-on, owned their mistakes, and worked tirelessly to make amends and create positive change." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Anderson's words were beginning to cut through the shock and scandal, replacing it with something else, a growing sense of admiration and respect. "But there's more to this story," Mrs. Anderson said, her voice taking on a note of reverence. Something that even these brave young people don't know. A truth that will show you all the true meaning of resilience, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of community. With that, Mrs. Anderson gestured to the back of the gymnasium. All heads turned to see three figures step out of the shadows: Maria Martinez, Lily's mother, Robert Thompson, Brittany's father, and James Parker, Ethan's dad. Lily, Brittany, and Ethan exchanged looks of confusion and apprehension. What was going on? As the three parents made their way to the stage, Mrs. Anderson's voice filled the silence. 17 years ago, this town faced a crisis. The mill that employed half of Willow Creek shut down overnight, leaving hundreds of families on the brink of ruin. But in that darkness, a spark of hope was born. Maria Martinez took the microphone, her eyes shining with unshed tears. We were all struggling, all desperate. But we refused to let our community crumble. So we came together, pooled what little resources we had, and made a pact. Robert Thompson stepped forward, his once proud posture now humbled but dignified. We created a fund, the Phoenix Fund, we called it. The idea was simple: we would support each other, help those in the direst need, and slowly rebuild our town from the ashes of economic ruin. James Parker, Ethan's father, continued the tale. For years, it worked. We kept businesses afloat, helped families keep their homes, sent kids to college. We thought we had beaten the odds. A heavy silence fell over the gymnasium as James's voice faltered. It was Maria who picked up the thread. But 3 years ago, things started to unravel. The fund was running dry, and desperation set in. Some of us. Her eyes flickered to Robert Thompson, made bad decisions, trying to multiply what little we had left through risky investments. Robert stepped forward, his voice heavy with remorse. I took chances I shouldn't have, gambled with money that wasn't mine to lose. And when it all came crashing down, I couldn't face the truth. I tried to cover it up, to fix it on my own. But I only made things worse. Brittany gasped, sudden understanding dawning in her eyes. This was the truth behind her family's downfall, not just personal greed, but a misguided attempt to save a community. Ethan's father spoke next, his voice barely above a whisper. When I found out what was happening, I panicked. I thought if I could just win back what we'd lost, I could fix everything. But gambling, it's a disease. I couldn't stop, and I dragged my family down with me. Tears were flowing freely now, not just from the families on stage, but from many in the audience as well. The story of Willow Creek's secret struggle was hitting home, awakening long-buried memories and emotions. Lily, her voice shaking, finally spoke. But what about my dad? How does he fit into all this? Maria's eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and compassion. Oh, Mija. Your father, he was one of the first to benefit from the Phoenix Fund. It paid for his rehab, helped him get back on his feet. But the demons of addiction, they're not easily conquered. When things started to fall apart, the stress, the guilt, it was too much for him. As the truth of their interconnected stories came to light, a profound shift seemed to occur in the gymnasium. The shock and scandal that Chad had hoped to create were replaced by a deep, collective empathy. The realization that no one in Willow Creek had been untouched by struggle, that even those who seemed most privileged had been fighting silent battles, was a powerful equalizer. Chad, seeing his plan crumbling before his eyes, made one last attempt to salvage his narrative. But they lied. They kept all this secret. How can you trust anything they say? It was Megan, of all people, who answered him. Stepping forward from the crowd, she fixed Chad with a steely gaze. They kept it secret to protect everyone, Chad. To give people hope, to keep our town alive. What's your excuse for trying to destroy all that? As Chad sputtered, unable to formulate a response, Lily felt a surge of something powerful rising within her. With a deep breath, she stepped to the center of the stage. "Listen, everyone," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "What happened here, the secrets, the struggles, it's not something to be ashamed of. It's proof of how strong we are as a community." She looked out at the sea of faces, classmates, teachers, parents, seeing not judgment, but a growing sense of unity. We've all been fighting our own battles, thinking we were alone. But we're not. We never were. And now that we know the truth, we have a choice to make. Ethan stepped up beside her, his hand finding hers. "We can let this tear us apart, go back to pointing fingers and dividing ourselves." Brittany joined them, completing their united front. "Or we can do what Willow Creek does best, come together, support each other, and build something even stronger than before." For a moment, the gymnasium was silent. Then, from the back of the room, a slow clap began. It was Sally from the diner, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. One by one, others joined in, the applause growing until it was a thunderous roar. Principal Harrison made his way to the stage, his eyes shining with pride and determination. "I think," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "that we've just witnessed the rebirth of the Phoenix Fund. Only this time, it won't be a secret burden carried by a few. It'll be a community effort, transparent and united." As plans began to form, with people offering ideas, resources, and support, Lily felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she found herself face to face with Chad. The former king of Willow Creek High looked utterly deflated, his earlier bravado replaced by genuine remorse. I'm sorry," he mumbled, unable to meet Lily's eyes. "I thought I was exposing the truth, but I was jealous. Of what you all had become, of the change you were creating. I wanted things to go back to the way they were, when I felt like I mattered." Lily studied him for a moment, seeing past the arrogant exterior to the insecure boy beneath. In that instant, she made a decision that would cement her transformation from outcast to leader. "Chad," she said gently, "you do matter. We all do. That's the point. And if you're willing to be part of this, to really commit to making Willow Creek better, then there's a place for you too." The look of relief and gratitude that washed over Chad's face was all the confirmation Lily needed. She held out her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Chad took it. As the night wore on, the charity gala transformed into something far more profound, a town hall, a reunion, a collective catharsis. Plans were made, committees formed, and a new sense of purpose infused the air. Lily found a quiet moment amidst the excitement to stand with Ethan and Brittany, marveling at how far they'd come. "Can you believe it?" Brittany whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "A few months ago, I thought my life was over. Now it feels like it's just beginning." Ethan nodded, his arm wrapped securely around Lily's waist. "It's like my dad always used to say, before everything. Rock bottom can be the strongest foundation on which to rebuild your life." Lily leaned into Ethan's embrace, feeling a sense of peace she'd never known before. "We've all hit rock bottom in our own ways. But look at us now. Look at what we've built together." As they stood there, watching their community come alive with renewed purpose and hope, Lily reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the lonely girl laughed at by her classmates to a catalyst for change, from a town divided by secrets to a community united in purpose, it was a transformation almost too miraculous to believe. But then again, Lily thought with a smile, the most powerful stories are often the ones that seem most unbelievable at first. In the weeks and months that followed, Willow Creek underwent a renaissance. The revived Phoenix Fund, now operated with full transparency and community input, began to work its magic once again. Small businesses flourished, families found stability, and a new spirit of cooperation infused every aspect of town life. Lily, Ethan, and Brittany became the unofficial leaders of a youth movement dedicated to community service and support. Their example inspired others, and soon the halls of Willow Creek High were filled not with cliques and rivalries, but with a sense of shared purpose and mutual respect. Chad, true to his word, became one of their most dedicated volunteers, his natural charisma now channeled into rallying support for various causes. Megan and other former members of the popular crowd found new fulfillment in mentoring younger students and organizing outreach programs. As for the parents whose secrets had started it all, they too found redemption. Robert Thompson's business acumen was put to use managing the Phoenix Fund, ensuring its longevity and impact. James Parker, with the support of his family and community, committed to recovery and began counseling other addicts. And Frank Martinez, Lily's father, inspired by his daughter's forgiveness and the town's support, finally found the strength to commit to sobriety. On a warm spring evening, almost a year after the fateful gala, Lily stood on the hill overlooking Willow Creek. The town glowed in the setting sun, a phoenix risen from its own ashes. She felt Ethan's presence before he spoke, a comfort as familiar now as her own heartbeat. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, slipping his hand into hers. Lily smiled, leaning into him. "I was just thinking about how far we've come. How one act of kindness, one decision to forgive, can set off a chain reaction that changes everything." Ethan nodded, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the sunset. "You know, when I first moved here, I thought I was entering my own personal hell. Turns out, it was the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of my life." "Ugh, you two are so sappy," Brittany's voice chimed in as she joined them on the hill. But her tone was affectionate, her smile genuine. "But I guess I can't argue with the sentiment. Who would have thought the three of us would end up here?" As they stood there, looking out over the town they'd helped rebuild, Lily felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. For every hardship, every tear, every moment of doubt that had led to this. For the friends who had become family, the enemies who had become allies, and the community that had become a home in the truest sense of the word. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. As darkness fell, the lights of Willow Creek twinkled to life, a constellation of hope and possibility. Lily took a deep breath, savoring the moment. She thought of all the people in town whose lives had been touched by the changes of the past year. Of Mrs. Anderson, whose guidance had been the spark that lit the flame of transformation. Of her mother, standing tall and proud after years of silent struggle. Of every person who had found the courage to reach out, to forgive, to begin again. In that moment, Lily understood a fundamental truth, that the most powerful stories, the ones that change us and change the world, are not about grand gestures or epic battles. They're about the small acts of kindness, the quiet moments of courage, the decision to see the best in others and in ourselves. As she stood there, flanked by two people who had once been on opposite ends of her world, Lily Martinez, the girl who had once been laughed at and ostracized, felt her heart swell with an emotion too big for words. It was more than happiness, more than pride. It was the profound satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, the most unbelievable transformations are the ones we create ourselves, one small step at a time. The night deepened, stars blinking to life in the velvet sky. But in Willow Creek, a new day was just beginning. A day full of promise, of possibility, of the unshakable belief that together, there was no challenge they couldn't overcome, no wound they couldn't heal, no future they couldn't build. And as Lily linked arms with Ethan and Brittany, ready to descend the hill and rejoin their community, she knew that this was more than just a happy ending. It was a new beginning, for all of them. A chance to write the next chapter of their story, one of hope, of redemption, of the incredible power of the human spirit to rise, phoenix-like, from the ashes of adversity. In the end, the transformation of Willow Creek was a testament to a simple but profound truth that in every person, no matter how lost or broken they may seem, there lies the potential for greatness. All it takes is one spark of kindness, one act of forgiveness, to ignite a flame that can light up the world. And as Lily took her first step down the hill, towards the twinkling lights of the town below, she carried that flame in her heart, ready to share its warmth with anyone who needed it. For she had learned the greatest lesson of all, that true strength lies not in standing alone, but in lifting others up alongside you. The laughter of her friends echoed in the night air, a joyous soundtrack to their descent. And Lily knew, with unshakable certainty, that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For they were no longer just classmates or neighbors, but a family forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the cooling waters of compassion. As they reached the bottom of the hill, the warm glow of Willow Creek enveloping them, Lily paused for one last look back. The hills stood silent and strong, a witness to their journey. And in that moment, she made a silent promise, to herself, to her friends, to her community. A promise to never forget where they had come from and to always keep striving for where they could go. With a smile that could outshine the stars, Lily turned back to her friends, to her future, to the endless possibilities that lay before them. "Come on," she said, her voice ringing with hope and determination. "We've got work to do." And as they walked into the embrace of their reborn town, the wind carried the echo of their laughter, their dreams, their unbreakable spirit. It was the sound of a new chapter beginning, of a story still unfolding. A story of resilience, of redemption, of the remarkable transformation that can occur when we open our hearts to the possibility of change. For Lily Martinez, for Willow Creek, for each and every person whose life had been touched by their journey, it was more than just a happy ending. It was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope can flourish, love can heal, and the most beautiful transformations can arise from the most unlikely beginnings. And so, as the night deepened and the stars winked their approval from above, the story of Willow Creek, of Lily, Ethan, Brittany, and every soul touched by their journey, became a legend. A tale whispered in the hallways of the high school, shared over coffee at Sally's diner, passed down from parent to child as a reminder of the power of compassion, forgiveness, and unity. Years later, long after Lily and her friends had graduated and moved on to new chapters in their lives, visitors to Willow Creek would often remark on the unique spirit of the town. They'd notice the way strangers greeted each other on the street, the vibrant community centers bustling with activity, the absence of the usual small-town divisions. And if they asked, they'd be directed to a mural on the side of Willow Creek High. There, painted in vivid colors, they'd see the story unfold, a girl with her head bowed, surrounded by mocking faces, the same girl standing tall, flanked by unlikely allies, a phoenix rising from ashes, its wings spread wide over a town reborn. At the bottom of the mural, a simple inscription read, "From the darkest moments, the brightest lights emerge." This is the story of Willow Creek, a testament to the strength we find in each other. Lily would return to that mural often over the years, sometimes alone, sometimes with Ethan by her side, their hands intertwined and wedding bands glinting in the sunlight. Other times, she'd meet Brittany there, the two women marveling at how far they'd come from the girls they once were. On one such visit, as autumn leaves danced on the breeze, Lily found herself standing before the mural with her young daughter, Sophie. "Mama," Sophie asked, her eyes wide with wonder, "is that really you in the painting?" Lily smiled, running her hand gently over her daughter's hair. "It is, sweetheart. That's where our story began." "But you look so sad in the first picture," Sophie observed, her brow furrowed with concern. Lily knelt down, meeting her daughter's gaze. "I was sad then, and scared too. But that's not where the story ends. You see, sometimes life gives us challenges that seem too big to overcome. But those challenges can also be opportunities to grow, to change, to discover strengths we never knew we had." Sophie nodded solemnly, taking in her mother's words. Then, with the innocent wisdom of a child, she asked, "Is that why you and Daddy and Aunt Brittany are always helping people? Because of what happened back then?" Lily felt her heart swell with pride and love. "That's exactly right, sweetie. We learned that when we support each other, when we choose kindness over cruelty and hope over despair, we can create something beautiful. Something much bigger than ourselves." As they turned to leave, Lily caught sight of a group of teenagers huddled near the mural, one of them looking particularly downcast. Without hesitation, she approached them, Sophie's hand held firmly in hers. "Hi there," she said warmly. "I couldn't help but notice you all gathered here. Is everything okay?" The teens looked up, surprise and a hint of recognition dawning on their faces. One of them, a girl with eyes that reminded Lily so much of herself at that age, spoke up hesitantly. "You're her, aren't you? The girl from the mural?" At Lily's nod, she continued, "We were just. Jason here is having a tough time. We thought maybe coming to look at this might help, you know? Give him some hope or something." Lily smiled gently, her gaze moving to the boy who must be Jason. She saw in him echoes of her own past struggles, of Ethan's quiet pain, of Brittany's masked insecurities. "Jason," she said softly, "I won't pretend to know exactly what you're going through. But I want you to know something. This mural? It's not just my story. It's the story of every person who's ever felt lost, or alone, or like they don't belong. And the most important part of the story isn't in these images. It's in what comes after, the life we choose to build, the people we choose to become." She gestured to his friends. "You've already got the most important ingredient for a beautiful future right here. People who care about you, who stand by you even when things are tough. Hold on to that. Let it be your strength when you feel weak, your light when everything seems dark." As she spoke, she saw something shift in Jason's eyes, a spark of hope, fragile but unmistakable. His friends moved closer, forming a protective circle around him, and Lily was struck by how history seemed to be repeating itself in the most beautiful way. "Thank you," Jason murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Lily reached out, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Thank you for reminding me what this is all about. Keep holding on to each other, okay? And remember, there's always hope, even in the darkest moments. Sometimes, that's where the most incredible transformations begin." As Lily walked away, Sophie's small hand in hers, she felt a profound sense of completion. The story that had begun on these school grounds so many years ago was still unfolding, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. She looked down at her daughter, seeing in her eyes the promise of new chapters yet to be written. And she knew, with unshakable certainty, that the legacy of Willow Creek, of compassion, of resilience, of the incredible power of unity, would live on through generations to come. As they reached their car, Lily took one last look back at the mural, at the group of teens still huddled together in its shadow. And she smiled, knowing that the true magic of their story wasn't in the paint on that wall, but in the ripples of kindness and hope that continued to spread, touching life after life, creating a tapestry of interconnected stories that would go on enriching the world in countless, immeasurable ways. "Come on, Sophie," she said, her voice filled with warmth and purpose. "Let's go home. We've got a lot of love to share with the world." And as they drove away, the spirit of Willow Creek, of second chances, of unlikely friendships, of the remarkable transformations that can occur when we open our hearts to the possibility of change, continued to thrive, a beacon of hope in a world that would always need reminders of the incredible strength of the human spirit.